Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Napoleon Bell. I'm the host of What's My Story, listening to interesting stories from ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the community. And glad that you are being a part of this for this particular story. So, this story, we're going to be speaking with Sgt.Tricia Knoles of the Kent State Police Department. So, I'd like to bring her on screen and welcome her to the program. Good morning, Sergeant. How are you?
Morning,
Very good. Well, it's our pleasure, and I'm glad to have you part of the program. And it's good to see. It looks like I'm looking out the window. At least it's nice and sunny out there, and not snowing there in Kent State.
There's a little bit of snow around, but it's just sunny now.
I understand. So, well, let's get started. Let me ask you this. You're a sergeant at the Kent State Police Department, and let me ask you though, how did you get? Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Did you grow up in that area, or are you originally from Ohio, or where are you from?
I'm from Northeast Ohio, born and raised, and still live in Cuyahoga Falls. So about
Um,
a 20-minute drive from where you're. Yeah.
okay, okay, very good, very good. So let me ask you then, going forward, is how did you get interested in law enforcement?
Well, growing up, I always heard officer stories from my grandpa. My grandpa was a state patrol officer. So, you know, in my family, we have a lot of military, a few police officers. So for me, it was probably one way or the other. I don't know if I picked the right one, but hey, I love my job. I've been a first responder for 23 years now. I started off as a dispatcher for the city of Cuyahoga Falls for about 7 years, and then I've been here at Kent State for 17.
Oh, wow! So you started dispatching to first responders, and so starting off there, what was that like?
Is the dispatcher? Well, the funny thing is, back then, being a female going into law enforcement was probably a little more difficult to get into that field. It is, uh, you know, not a typical female job, especially back in this was in the late 90s. So the city of Tiger Falls was hiring dispatchers, and I thought, hey, this might help me put my foot in the door, which in the long run it did help. But I stayed there for 7 years. I really enjoyed dispatching. I still fill in as a dispatcher from time to time when our dispatch staff here has been short staffed, so I'll fill in and help with dispatch as well. So I enjoyed my time there. I actually won Dispatch of the Year for the state of Ohio. It was called the Gold Star Award back in 2004 for dispatching. Um, so actually part of my story, the TJ call, it actually stemmed from that call.
Oh, okay, okay. So I imagine that dispatching kind of helped
Yeah.
you in the law enforcement. I mean, because you probably know all the 10 codes and all of that, going right into law enforcement, going into patrol
Yes.
work.
The codes are different here than they are there because they're different counties. So I always say I'm bilingual when it comes to codes and signals.
Gotcha, gotcha. So then you moved on to law enforcement and doing patrol work and what have you. What was that experience like? And go into telling us your whole story about um, being in law enforcement.
Well, I mean, that's different. You're on the other side of the radio. There's some similarities and some differences. Um, but more like into my story. My story actually started in the dispatch field where I took a call of a 9-year-old boy's stepdad shot his mom and his aunt, and then actually came back. His intentions were to shoot the 9-year-old boy while I was on the phone with him. In
Oh,
an interview after the fact, when he got caught, he said that, yeah, he realized he left a witness. So he came back. But I was on the phone with him, ended up having him run. Our officers got involved in a shootout with him, and was able to get the 9-year-old boy to safety. And then the very next 911 call, as soon as that call was like, okay, everyone's safe, 911 rang again, and I looked at my partner and I said, hey, can you take that? Like, I need a second. I really thought I was going to hear, a child die. So my partner took it, and her name was Diane, and all of a sudden I hear my home address being dispatched. Um, my daughter, who was 10 months old at the time, was seizing. Never had any health issues beforehand.
Mm.
So yeah, and typically in an event of an emergency, we can call an officer in off the road to cover so we can leave. But they were involved in an officer-involved shooting and a double homicide, so they couldn't just come off the road. So I called dispatcher in, left, get to the hospital. Long story short, my daughter seized for like 45 minutes. She had to get a CAT scan because they thought she may end up having brain damage from seizing for so long. We were very fortunate that she didn't have any brain damage.
Good.
But she's actually a sophomore at Kent State now.
Oh,
So
wow.
she's doing well. She's doing well. But yeah, so once we left the hospital, it was about 4 or 5 days later that we left, was when I came home. And that night was the first night I had what I called the TJ dream, the 9-year-old boy. So at first, it was almost every night I was losing sleep. I would have this repetitive dream of this 9-year-old boy running down the street. It would vary a little bit, but it was all primarily the same dream where I could either see him running and see the guy chasing him with a gun, or I could see him running. I would be running behind him, kind of shielding him between the guy. And then, after a while, the dream started to dissipate, where I would typically only have it right around June 11th, which was the anniversary date of that event. Or if I was really, really stressed, I would just end up having that dream. So this actually went on for almost 14 years. But I was like, I'm fine, if it's only happening a couple times a year, I'm fine, it's nothing like debilitating. And it wasn't until like another incident that happened that I had that dream 3 times in 1 week. And we're talking, that was 14 years later. And I'm like, okay, that's not normal for me. So fortunately, I'm also a peer support member of the Ohio Assist team, which we do post-critical incident seminars 4 times a year. They are free for all first responders in the state of Ohio. Actually, we take people from other states too. We've had people from as far out as Arizona come to this program, but it's all free. We pay for the hotel, the food, everything's free. But we have a team of mental health clinicians that work solely with first responders. Some also have veterans and first responders. Some are first responders, and they're also mental health clinicians. So I was like, okay, well, when I go back, I'm going to go ahead and talk to one of them. And so they said, I know we've talked before about EMDR and you've done EMDR. Do you want to do, but have you ever done EMDR specifically to that dream? And I said, no. So we ended up doing EMDR, and it's been 3.5 years and I haven't had a dream. So I'll call that a success.
So explain what is MDR?
EMDR. I always have a problem saying the D, but EMDR is eye movement desensitized. Yes, thank you. I can't say it. And reprocessing. So essentially, there's different theories on how it works. My viewpoint that how I think it works is, your brain actually processes trauma while you're sleeping during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And so essentially, it's almost like tricking your brain into rapid eye movements. Like you'll either watch someone kind of go back and forth with their fingers, or you watch a light bar, or you'll tap, and then the clinician will talk to you during that. So it's not hypnosis. It's literally reprocessing where that memory is kept in your brain. So, it's nothing painful or anything like that. And honestly, it works on 90% of the people who are candidates for EMDR. So we've seen a lot of results on EMDR treatment. There's other cognitive treatments that people can take or do with a licensed clinician, but I'm a huge proponent of EMDR because I've done it a few times for different things. But backtrack into a little bit more of that story during that time, and I've skipped a lot of things, but just to get to the gist of it, because a lot of people, especially in my field, are really afraid to talk about suicide or suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And it actually took me many years. And now I'm like, you know what? We need to talk about it because people aren't talking about mental health or self-care in first responder world because we're rough and tough and we don't need that stuff. But that whole thought process of we don't need that stuff has gotten a lot of first responders, with completed suicides. And so we need to stop that trend.
Right.
But yeah, so during that whole time, after the call with my daughter, the call with the 9-year-old boy, I had a lot of untreated trauma. But back then, nobody talked about it. So nobody knew. I didn't really know what to do. Honestly, back then I was like, am I going crazy? My husband at the time, which I don't fault because nobody talked about it, but he was like, if you can't handle this, maybe you're not cut out for this job. Maybe you should do something else. And, but again, that's how things were back then. Like, you got to be rough, tough, and all of that. Not, no, you're human and this is normal. We can help and get through this, But again, no fault because it wasn't talked about back then. But so, long story short, I think it had a lot to do, the unresolved trauma with leading to a divorce.
Oh, wow.
I
Sorry.
worked, first night I had to come home to an empty house was like rough on me, really rough on me. So still have this unresolved trauma, never had any kind of treatment for any of that stuff. Came home to an empty house. I had that evening on that shift, I had actually confided into another officer that I just really didn't want to go home that night. I didn't want to go home to an empty house. I felt like a failure of a mom, a failure of a wife, and those were really important for me. I always wanted to be this, super mom and super wife and all of that.
Yeah.
And so went home, did a few things, drove down an area of downtown Akron that I probably shouldn't have been at. Was hoping something would happen. But when nothing did, ended up coming home, started
So
chugging.
you actually drove into a bad area, hoping that something would happen to you.
Yes, in my personal vehicle, in my uniform, with my gun unsecured.
Wow.
Yeah. So when nothing did, I went home. The only thing, this I always joke about, this was actually also the last time I ever drank Parrot Bay, but that was all that was in my pantry was a fifth of Parrot Bay. So, took a couple shots and then just started chugging the bottle. Then I thought, I need to write a note to my daughter because I don't want her to be confused as to why I'm doing this. I had my gun on the table, on the coffee table, and I was writing, like, someday you'll have a better mom. I'm sorry I failed you, that type of stuff. I remember looking at this picture that we had above the love seat it was like a portrait, like a Christmas portrait of her dad and I and her in this picture and like bawling. And then I did end up with the gun in my mouth and, like saying like, okay, God, like if I'm not meant to do this, then you better stop me. Obviously I probably dropped an F-bomb in there or said worse things than what I'm saying now, but I'm like, you better stop me because I'm about to do it. And then I got a text message from that officer that I confided in earlier. And I'm telling you, like, I can't even tell you what time of night it was. He had to end up staying over, and it was a jurisdiction over from my department. Ended up staying over, so he just texted. He's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Not good."
And this is right at the time when you actually got the gun.
This was right, yeah. This was right when I said, "Okay, God, if you if I'm not meant to do this, you better stop me because I'm about to do it right now.
Mm.
And then my my cell phone, like looking back at it now, I kind of find it funny because I'm like, really, a text message guy, but
Works in
but yeah,
mysterious ways. So, you know,
oh yeah, yeah, and like I'm glad I said something earlier, like me just confiding in him, like I was really having an issue with going home to an empty house and, God laid it on his heart, like you better check up on her right now, hit that send button. But so when I told him I wasn't doing good, he said, well, just don't do anything stupid. And I texted back something along the lines of, to me right now, this doesn't seem stupid. And so he called and then he kept me on the phone while he was coming up, and it showed up at my door and said,
Mm.
Get upstairs, go to bed. He hid my gun, unloaded it, I'm sure. Now it's like seems so long ago. And I definitely was sloshy. So I don't remember certain things. The text messages I remember reading afterwards. But he hid the gun but he did say like he stayed there, sat down there and waited to make sure that I wasn't gonna wake back up and come downstairs or whatever. So yeah,
Oh
so
my gosh.
he saved my life that night through God.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah, so again, like just mental health, self-care, that stuff was not talked about back in the day. And that was even when that happened, that was actually April 17th of 2009. I have all these dates that I always remember,
Yeah.
but that was, it was a big time in my life.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but you know, part of my story now I kind of do like a then and now. Like, I really thought, now I do peer support. I oversee our peer support team, interdepartmental team, the county team. I'm the police liaison, and then I'm also on the Ohio team, the state team. And so I have a lot of resources. I go around and teach about PTSD, trauma, self-care, all of that stuff. I have a lot of support, good support system. I mean, we have, I don't know, 10 or more clinicians on the Ohio Assist team. So I call them all my clinicians. They're all mine, that I can call anytime, or anyone else in the peer support team. Um, so, my story's changed a little bit. That's the then. The then was really bad. I thought that was the worst moment of my life, to the
Wow.
point where I was about to end it. And now, this past year, by far, has been the worst moment of my life. It's Yet I never went back down that hole, or back down to
Mm.
that dark place and I don't see myself doing that either.
Sure.
I have a lot of support. This is really rough. I'm just gonna preface this. We just had the 1 year anniversary of my son-in-law, and then my 1 year anniversary of losing my brother is December 13th. So we're coming up on that.
Mm.
This whole 1 year thing, I didn't think was going to hit as bad as it has, but as it gets closer, it gets a little rough. But
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, so back then I thought that was the worst time of my life. This has been the worst time of my life. So back in October, late last day of October or November 1st, my husband and I decided we were going to go to Disney World, happiest place on earth. And he had never been, and it's been a while since I had gone. So we had a great first 4 days. On the fifth day, my stepdaughter called and said that her husband had killed himself. And they were both, they were doing like a rent to own
Mm.
at my old house. So I owned the house they lived in. He had killed himself, gunshot wound, in the backyard. So obviously, couldn't make it home that day. The soonest we could fly home was the next day. So we made it home finally. And, you know, they said he did it in the backyard and that it was pretty messy. My husband is not a first responder. So I told him, you know, hey, I'm a first responder. I have, you know, my mind's already messed up, but I just joke around. But you know, it comes with the job. But I
Right.
said, you know, I have a lot of, you know, support, clinicians, peer support, people I can reach out to. So I'll go do it. So I went in the backyard and cleaned that area up. Plus, I said, you know, as a police officer, a lot of times we learn to disassociate ourselves with something like just to get the job done. You can think about it later. So, you know, as I pulled in the driveway, it started hitting me. And I'm like, nope, nope, I'm just here to clean a mess. Was kind of the mind frame I had to put myself in.
Right.
But then after I cleaned the area up, and this is kind of like the difference between then and now, because then I would have just, you know, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm fine. Which if you don't know what FINE stands for, I always say FINE if someone says they're just fine, FINE stands for effed up, irrational, neurotic, and emotional. So I always say to check on that person again. If they use the word fine, I'm fine. But so the difference this time, after I was done with that, I texted our head mental health clinician for Ohio Assist team and 3 of my peers that are on the Ohio Assist team. And I said, you know, I'm okay right now, but I just want to let you know what I just had to do in case somebody gets a 2 or 3 in the morning phone call from me, you know. So I did that for 2 reasons. First off, to let them know in case it did kind of hit me, because I was okay. I actually was doing better than what I thought I was going to do.
Okay.
But I mean, we have 5 daughters, so he was like our only son, you know.
Yeah.
So it was difficult. For two reasons, again, so they knew what was going on in my life. But the main reason was because if it did hit me in a couple days, I knew they would be checking up on me. Because in a couple days, I might have been like, you know, I don't want to burden anyone. I'm not going to, you know, I knew they'd check up on me, and every single one of them did. So I set myself up for success by telling, you know, like telling them what was going on so that I knew they would check up on me later. And then, you know, the house was very messy. They were young. They liked to have parties. So, you know, we're making double mortgage payments, double utility payments, replacing walls, doors, carpet, flooring. I mean, we just came back from Disney.
Wow.
So we had saved up to go to Disney, and now we have every credit card maxed out. We actually took out a Home Depot credit card, pretty much maxed that out as well. You know, so we were struggling.
Yeah.
With finances at that time because everything just hit at once. Which I will shout out. My department was absolutely amazing to me. My assistant chief had called to check up on me because of everything going on, just to see how I was doing. Caught me at a bad time. I haven't mentioned how, you know, we were struggling. We were eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We were eating Taco Bell $5 boxes for food.
Yeah.
We hadn't gone grocery shopping in like 6 weeks, you know, so my department got together and like brought food over and brought like several $100s worth of gift cards and stuff to help us out. So they were absolutely amazing. I love my department. We stick together as family. But during that time of flipping the house, getting it ready to sell, because I was like, we got to put it on the market as soon as possible. We cannot continue to afford to making, you know, 2 house payments. So it took us 5 weeks to flip that. Within those 5 weeks, my brother and sister came down with COVID. It was a couple days before Thanksgiving. Long story short, he went into the hospital the day after Thanksgiving. His oxygen level was at like 60. It was in the 60s, which at the time they were saying if it's under 80%, you need to go in the hospital. So he was doing pretty bad to begin with. But he was healthy, 47 years old, so he's young, healthy, no pre-existing conditions. I guess he was in the less than, I think it's 2% that end up passing, with no, being his age. I mean, 47 is pretty young. um, and so yeah, within a couple weeks of him being in the hospital, it was like 2 weeks and 4 days. It went really quick. And the doctors there were really good. And they said, you know, it really wasn't COVID that was killing people. It was what COVID was doing to the organs. He ended up having to be put on a ventilator because his lungs were getting so weak from trying to work so hard to breathe because just regular oxygen wasn't working. And then he had a kind of like a mild heart attack. And that was when it was really like attacking his heart. And they gave him 24 to 48 hours to live after that. So he ended up having to be pulled from the ventilator because that was the more humane thing than to allow him to have a massive heart attack. You know, what the doctors discussed with the family, and we just wanted him to not be and to do the most humane thing for him. So he was my only sibling. He was my older brother. He was a year and 9 months older than me. So yeah, we were always asked if we were twins growing up because we both looked about the same age and we look a lot alike. So yeah, we were pretty close, and so that was really rough. And it's been a really rough year. But again, I at least use it as like a then and now because again, I have a support system and they're amazing. And, you know, I have amazing clinicians that have been helping me through the grieving process. And grief is rough. I will tell you that, you know, we've all lost somebody, but
it sounds like I'm just so impressed with, I don't know if I call it stamina or just that will to keep going forward, to keep going on through all this adversity that you've had over so many years. It just seems to compile year after year. But I also, you know, applaud that you were able to find the help necessary to keep going forward, because it definitely sounds like without that help, those people wrapping their arms around you would not have truly survived all of this.
Well, and that's what I always tell people, like, you have to talk to people. You have to. First responder or not, nobody is too tough to go and talk to somebody. I would say we start this career with a backpack, and throughout that career, you start throwing things in your backpack. And that's why, to me, like, the traumatic incidents or critical incidents that happened June 11, 2004, the TJ call with my daughter, like that happened to me, but that's no longer in my backpack. That's been unpacked. So it's not really compiling. And that's where, you know, a lot of first responders have to remember that along the way, if you don't unpack your backpack by talking to people, you know, taking care of yourself, there's so much more than just exercise and physical wellness. There's spiritual wellness and emotional wellness and mental health wellness that are actually the 4 pillars of resiliency, you know, to keep you going forward. So, so yeah, I mean, I don't have a choice. I have way too much to do with my life left, and you know, and an amazing family and amazing coworkers, and yeah, so hopefully I have way too much to do to try and help other first responders because again, our suicide rate, our depression rate, our alcoholism rate in the first responder world, it's just way too much, and we need to learn other ways of coping and resiliency.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I can't appreciate you enough, first responders, but just by hopefully those who will see this and be inspired to, maybe they're struggling, right? And they see that what you have done and the resources that you have pulled together around you, and those who have come together, that they'll do the same thing. But I just applaud you and continuing on and most importantly, spreading this message, let other people know about, you know, that there is help available, and there's help out there to help you get through these things. And this doesn't apply just to first responders, but there's so many people out there, that have some of the same type of things that are happening at critical incidents that they need the help. And they have to be open enough to accept the help and say, hey, like you talked about, they're not fine, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, say again.
I was agreeing with you. Absolutely. Like, we need to get the word out, and hopefully there comes a day. I think stigma's getting better, as far as like mental health and talking to people, or post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-traumatic stress. Like, I think the stigma is starting to go away, which is a good thing. We need to talk about it. We're all human. It doesn't make us, crazy or weird or anything like that. Like, there's treatments, where things affect us.
Yeah.
It makes us human to have emotions.
Right. Remove the shield and all the armor and
Exactly.
let somebody help. Well, Sgt.Tricia Knoles, we appreciate you and everything that you're doing there in Kent State, but also appreciate that you are still here to spread the message. So thank you so much for your story here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. You take care.
All right. Thank you.
That was Sgt.Tricia Knoles. Amazing story. One of resilience, and just truly one to look towards to show the way. So we're hoping to hear more positive things coming from her in the many future years, but also we're waiting to hear your story. What is your story? Have a great week and take care.